She offered her first-class seat to a man with severe burns, never expecting it to change her life. Weeks later, a helicopter landed in her yard, carrying a secret billionaire and a world of power she'd never imagined. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Emma Blake had always found comfort in the routine of her job. The sounds of the airplane engines, seatbelt clicks, and quiet service had become second nature. For 5 years, she had flown the same routes, made the same announcements, and met countless passengers. Yet one day, she noticed a man who stood out. It was a routine flight from New York to Los Angeles, but something felt off. As she walked down the aisle, she saw him immediately, a man sitting alone in first class, his hands tightly folded in his lap, his face pale under the cabin's dim light. His clothes, though neat, showed signs of wear, faded jeans and a well-worn button-up. He didn't belong, not like the others. His discomfort was evident in the way he shifted in his seat, his eyes darting nervously between the window and the flight attendants, avoiding direct eye contact. Over the years, Emma had learned to read discomfort, whether it was the fidgeting of an anxious flyer or the strained smiles of those impatient with travel. But his unease was different, deeper, almost physical. When he adjusted himself again, a slight wince betrayed him, as though every movement caused him pain. It was then she saw the truth. His hands trembled, not with nerves, but with something more profound, pain. She couldn't help but notice him, and for a brief moment their eyes met. He quickly looked away, as if ashamed of something she couldn't yet see. But she had already seen him, truly seen him. While the rest of the cabin carried on as usual, Emma couldn't stop thinking about him. She had dealt with all kinds of passengers, businessmen, celebrities, tired travelers. But his silence wasn't the arrogance of the privileged. It was the quiet of someone who had suffered, someone who had seen worse than any flight could bring. Compelled by an urge she couldn't explain, Emma approached him. "Mr. Harris," she said gently, "would you like to move to my seat? It might be more comfortable for you." Surprise flashed in his eyes, followed by hesitation. After a pause, he simply nodded, a silent agreement to accept her unexpected offer. As he moved to her seat, Emma saw his trembling hands, clenched in an effort to control them, and then the scars on his face, burns that marred his once handsome features. They told a story of suffering that she could never fully understand. Yet in that moment, she understood that her simple gesture, a seat, meant more than anything else she could offer. As he settled into her seat, Emma returned to her duties, but the flight had changed for her. The world felt smaller, quieter, as if a single act of kindness had shifted the air around her room. She couldn't know what would come next, but she knew that her small act of compassion would matter more than anything else that day. In the days after the flight, Emma's routine returned to its usual monotony. Her Brooklyn apartment was a small, cluttered reminder of her life's burdens, unopened bills, the hum of her old fridge, and the lingering smell of coffee. She lived paycheck to paycheck, exhausted but resigned to it. She thought she had made peace with it, until the phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. Distracted by the mountain of paperwork, she didn't expect anything unusual. But when she answered, a calm, deep voice spoke her name. "Ms. Blake, this is James Harris." The name didn't immediately click, but then he spoke again. "I'd like to meet with you as soon as possible." Her heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "Of course, Mr. Harris. What's this about?" His pause was heavy, as though gathering his thoughts. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. "What you did for me was more than offering a seat. You showed me kindness when the world had forgotten how." Emma was silent, not knowing how to respond. She had barely thought about her gesture. It was simply an act of compassion. But his words carried weight. "It wasn't a big deal," she said softly, though she didn't fully believe it. His voice cracked. "It meant everything to me." In that moment, Emma understood that her small act had meant something profound to him. That afternoon, she walked into a cafe in Manhattan, feeling out of place among its polished surroundings. When she met James Harris, his tailored appearance did little to hide the heaviness in his eyes. They exchanged awkward small talk before he leaned in, his voice lowering. "The man you helped wasn't just any Marine," he said. "He's the heir to Harris Industries and a survivor of an accident that nearly killed him." Emma froze, stunned. She hadn't known. The idea of the man she'd helped being connected to such wealth and power was surreal. James wasn't done. He handed her an envelope, its weight startling. Inside was a check for $250,000. She blinked, trying to process it. It was more than she'd ever seen in her life, more than she'd earned in 10 years. "I can't accept this," she said, the words coming out instinctively. It was too much. James smiled, not smugly, but with deep respect. "I don't want you to take it as charity. I want to offer you a role in our organization. We could use someone like you, someone who values humanity, loyalty, and compassion." The words hung heavily between them. This was more than an offer. It was a promise of something entirely different from her life. Emma felt a mix of fear and awe. She had never imagined a simple act of kindness could lead her to such a life. But as she looked at the check again, something shifted. There was no turning back. Emma's life began to shift in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. The offer from James Harris was irresistible, an elite position with a salary that could solve all her financial worries. Yet, despite its allure, something inside her hesitated. Why her? Why had James gone to such lengths to find her, to offer her this opportunity? There were too many unanswered questions. What did James really want? And why was he so insistent that she meet with his father, the powerful and enigmatic James Harris Sr.? When Emma finally met the elder Harris, the true nature of the offer began to unfold. James Sr. was older, wiser, and far more mysterious than his son. There was something commanding in his presence, a quiet authority that made Emma feel both small and important. He didn't speak of money or status. Instead, he hinted at something deeper. "You've proven yourself capable of seeing beyond the surface, Ms. Blake," he said, his voice measured. "That's why we want you on board. There's more at stake here than just a job. We need people who understand the value of human connections." Emma felt the weight of his words settle around her. This wasn't about a paycheck. It was about something bigger, something beyond her reach. She hadn't expected such an offer, but she couldn't deny the pull it had on her. His words hinted at a life of influence and purpose, but also one of responsibility and scrutiny. It wasn't a world she'd ever considered, and the idea of stepping into it filled her with both awe and trepidation. James Sr.'s gaze never left her as he spoke. "It's not a life for the faint of heart," he added, his voice softening for a moment. "But I believe you have what it takes to make a difference." The room seemed to close in around her. She had always been part of the unseen world, the workers, the quiet ones. But this was an invitation to step into something much larger, a chance to change everything. But with it came about, "You'll have everything you need," he concluded, his tone final. "But once you step through that door, there's no turning back." Emma's mind swirled with uncertainty. Was she ready to leave her life behind and embrace the unknown? She didn't know yet, but she understood this was a decision that would shape her future, one way or another. Emma stood at the edge of a world that seemed too vast to grasp fully. Every day in her new role felt like walking into an intricate dance, smooth, precise, yet laced with an underlying tension she could never quite shake. The offices of Harris Industries were grand, polished with an air of authority that made her feel both out of place and strangely empowered. She had never imagined herself surrounded by the wealth and power that these towering walls represented. Yet, as much as the opulence took her breath away, it was the undercurrent of integrity within the family that slowly drew her in, rooting her to something larger than just the material rewards she had initially seen. James Harris had warned her in his own way that she was stepping into a world where actions mattered on a global scale, where influence and decisions stretched beyond boardrooms and into lives. The role she had accepted was far more than just a job. It was a responsibility that tied her to people, to cause, to something that could change the world. She was part of their philanthropic efforts, advising on charitable initiatives that reflected the values she had always held dear, helping those in need, making a difference where it counted most. But the reality of her new life soon became clearer. It was not enough to simply give. It was about how, when, and why. The meetings were intense, discussions filled with statistics, strategies, and projections of impact. Yet every time Emma sat in one of those high-powered rooms, she couldn't help but feel a spark of purpose ignite inside her. This wasn't just about changing the lives of a few, it was about changing the world, one project at a time. Months into the role, Emma found herself sitting across from key figures of Harris Industries, a team of experts who had grown accustomed to making monumental decisions. The air was thick with anticipation as they discussed a groundbreaking initiative aimed at helping burn victims, a project that aligned with everything Emma had believed in long before joining the Harris family. It wasn't just about financial backing or public relations. It was about using their resources to provide life-saving treatments, offering hope to those whose scars ran deeper than just the physical. James Sr. leaned forward at the table, his calm demeanor unshaken as he addressed Emma directly. His words cut through the noise, steady and unwavering. "This is what you were meant to do, not just for us, but for the world," he said, his gaze fixed on her. "You never knew that day you gave up your seat, you'd change the lives of thousands. You may not be the richest person in the room, but your heart is worth more than anything money can buy." His words struck Emma deeply, the weight of them sinking into her chest like a stone. She smiled, though it was a quiet smile, the kind that spoke of something profound that couldn't be put into words. Her heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and pride. The small act of kindness, the one she had barely thought twice about, had led her here, into a position where she could touch lives in ways she had never imagined. As the meeting continued, Emma's mind drifted briefly, her gaze lifting to the expansive windows that framed the city below. The skyline stretched endlessly, a sea of glass and steel, but to Emma it felt more like a reflection of her own journey. She had stepped into this world uncertain, unsure if she belonged, and yet here she was. It was never about the money, never about the fame or accolades. She had always known that those things were fleeting. The true reward was in the work, the tangible, lasting differences she could make. And now she was doing it. As she looked out over the sprawling cityscape, Emma realized that the reward she had longed for wasn't one that could be measured in dollars or public recognition. It was the understanding that she had remained true to herself, even as the world around her changed. In the face of the most unexpected challenges, she had stayed grounded in her values. This was only the beginning, she knew. The journey was far from over, and the true impact of her actions had only just begun to unfold. The world, as vast and overwhelming as it was, had become a place where her heart and her actions could leave an indelible mark.